Darkseid has restructured the multiverse, and the absolute universe is his twisted creation. A universe where hope is the villain, and every hero is forced to rise against impossible odds. The Justice League Unlimited and the Legion of Darkseid collide in an epic battle for survival. But in a world where nothing is what it seems, who will win when hope is buried beneath chaos? The fate of all realities rests in the hands of those brave enough to challenge Darkseid's twisted legacy. The rise of the absolute universe. The universe, as we knew it, was changing. A dark force had already begun its descent upon the multiverse, and it was no longer the place we thought we understood. The absolute universe was born of chaos, sculpted by a being so powerful, so terrifying, that even the gods of the multiverse feared him, Darkseid. It all started when the Flash Barry Allen discovered something that would forever alter the fate of not just Earth, but the entire multiverse. Amanda Waller, the ruthless mastermind behind the Suicide Squad, had been quietly assembling an army capable of invading realities, a force that could topple entire universes. But Barry knew that if Waller succeeded, the destruction would be unstoppable. Desperate to stop her, Barry did what he thought was the only way. He destroyed the multiversal gateway Waller had been using to transport her army. The explosion sent shockwaves throughout the multiverse, severing the main DC universe from all other realities. Every connection was lost. Every gateway closed. Except for one. One lone reality remained accessible, hanging in the balance between worlds. A universe on the brink of collapse, ready to be remade. A universe where hope was a forgotten dream, and the only thing that mattered was survival. It was here, in the darkness of this broken world, that the absolute universe began to form. Justice League Unlimited, once a symbol of hope and unity, was now a distant memory. The heroes who once stood together in the face of evil were scattered and divided, uncertain of their place in a world that no longer embraced them. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Mr. Terrific, and the others realized that even their combined strength couldn't hold back the growing darkness. But they were determined to try. In their darkest hour, they formed a new alliance, Justice League Unlimited, and brought in new members, including the bold and brash Booster Gold, who would soon learn that even the brightest lights could be swallowed by the darkness. But no sooner had they formed this new league than an invasion began, not from some otherworldly army, but from Darkseid himself. His power, amplified by the energy of the Spectre, the living embodiment of divine judgment, was more than the Justice League could ever prepare for. The fight was brutal, with each hero struggling against Darkseid's overwhelming might. Booster Gold, once a symbol of flashy heroism, quickly found himself outmatched. He had never faced anything like this before. Darkseid, wielding the power of the Spectre, was unstoppable, and even the Justice League Unlimited stood no chance against his wrath. The battle raged on, destroying everything in its path, until finally, Darkseid stood victorious. But in his victory, something unexpected happened. As Darkseid fell, seemingly defeated, a tear in space-time opened, revealing something far greater than any of them had anticipated. A new world, a new reality, began to take shape before their eyes. Superman, the last symbol of hope, stared into the rift, unable to comprehend what was happening. Batman analyzed the readings, his mind racing to make sense of it. And Mr. Terrific, the greatest mind on Earth, came to the chilling conclusion. The destruction of the multiversal gateway had triggered something far more dangerous. This wasn't just another alternate reality. This was something new. A universe that was still forming, still being shaped by an unknown hand. A universe where everything they knew was twisted, turned upside down. And the only thing they knew for certain was that Darkseid was behind it all. The truth was worse than they could have imagined. The rift wasn't just a tear, it was a doorway. A doorway to a new reality that existed outside the normal flow of time. And within that new reality, Darkseid had found his ultimate purpose. For as long as they could remember, Darkseid had sought to conquer the multiverse, to bring every world under his control. But in the absolute universe, he saw something different, a world where he could become more than just a conqueror. Here, he would be the god of this twisted new reality, shaping it as he saw fit, bending it to his will. And so, with a cruel smirk on his face, Darkseid began his work. He used the miracle machine, a device forged from the past, present, and future, to reshape the absolute universe to his whims. Powered by his own blood, and the blood of those he deemed necessary, the machine worked as a catalyst for his ultimate plan. It was here, in this new universe, that hope no longer had any place. It was here that heroes would rise, but they would rise only to face the greatest challenges of their lives. The universe would test them, not nurture them. In the absolute universe, there was no easy victory, no happily ever after. There were no allies, only adversaries. But one hero would stand against it all. Superman, the last hope for a dying multiverse, knew that he couldn't let Darkseid reshape reality into something so evil, so twisted. He wasn't alone. Booster Gold, Wonder Woman, and the remnants of the Justice League Unlimited were with him. But this time, they knew that their mission was far more than just a fight for survival. They were fighting for the very essence of hope itself. The battle ahead would be unlike anything they had ever faced before. But this time, the stakes were higher. Darkseid wasn't just a conqueror. He was the architect of this new reality. And no matter how hard the heroes tried, Darkseid's vision for the absolute universe would be realized unless they could find a way to destroy it from the inside. As Superman prepared for the final confrontation with Darkseid, he knew one thing for sure. This wouldn't be just another battle. This was the fight for everything. The absolute universe was born, and it would not fall without one last fight. But the world they were fighting for was no longer the same. Heroes would rise, but would they survive? Darkseid's empire, the battle for the absolute universe, had only just begun. The Justice League Unlimited, battered and bruised from their previous clash with Darkseid, had no idea what they were truly up against. For the first time, they were facing not just a villain, but an entire reality bent to his will. This wasn't just an invasion. It was the birth of a new universe, one where hope was the enemy and chaos reigned supreme. As Superman surveyed the wreckage of the battlefield, his mind raced. He had seen destruction before, but this was something different. Darkseid wasn't just a conqueror now. He was a god, shaping this new universe in his own twisted image. The miracle machine that powered his every move was the key. It was a device that allowed him to reshape reality, to bend the very fabric of existence to his will. And with each drop of blood, each sacrifice, Darkseid grew stronger, his power limitless. It was as if the absolute universe itself was feeding him, nurturing him, making him more powerful than anything they had ever faced. "We can't win this, can we?" Booster Gold said, his voice tinged with fear as he looked at the dark sky above them, filled with swirling clouds and a dim, unholy light. He wasn't a pessimist by nature, but even he couldn't ignore the sheer weight of the situation. "No, we can," Superman replied, his voice steady despite the uncertainty in his heart. "We must." But how? They had no idea how to stop a universe that was designed to resist them at every turn. Darkseid's vision was clear, a reality where heroes would no longer be hailed as champions, but instead would rise only to face impossible odds. A reality where the very essence of hope was buried under the weight of turmoil and despair. In this universe, Superman wasn't the symbol of hope he had been in the past. Here, he was just another player in a game where victory was uncertain, and survival was everything. And Darkseid was always one step ahead. As the Justice League Unlimited regrouped, Batman began to analyze their options. He was a tactician, a strategist. He didn't give up, no matter how dire the situation. But even he knew that facing Darkseid and his army of Absolute Legion was a task that required more than just strength or tactics. They needed an edge, something the enemy couldn't anticipate. "We need to find the source of his power," Batman muttered, his eyes scanning the horizon. "The miracle machine. If we can destroy that, we can stop him." Wonder Woman, standing beside him, clenched her fists. "How? He's too powerful. Even if we get close, the odds are against us. He controls everything in this universe." Just then, Booster Gold stepped forward, a grim look on his face. "There's one thing you haven't considered." "What's that?" Superman asked. "The Omega particle." The others looked at him in confusion. "It's the key to everything," Booster Gold explained. "Darkseid has been searching for it. It's the source of his power. If we can get our hands on it first, we might be able to turn the tide." The team fell silent. The Omega particle was no ordinary force. It was the very essence of Darkseid's power, capable of reshaping reality itself. If they could find it, they could use it to destroy the miracle machine and defeat Darkseid. But there was one major problem. Darkseid wasn't the only one after it. In the heart of the absolute universe, Joker had been reborn. Not the Joker they knew, the chaotic, unpredictable force of nature. This was something different. Absolute Joker had learned the truth behind the universe's creation. He had discovered the Omega particle, and in doing so had become something far darker, more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. The Absolute Joker wasn't just a clown anymore. He was a force of destruction, driven by the knowledge that Darkseid's empire could be overthrown, that reality itself could be reshaped. He had his own plans, his own twisted vision for this universe. And he wasn't about to let anyone, hero or villain, stand in his way. As the Justice League Unlimited set out to find the Omega particle, they were unaware that Absolute Joker was watching their every move. His eyes, devoid of the madness they once knew, were now filled with cold, calculating malice. "You think you're the only ones who can change the universe," Joker whispered to himself, his voice cold and chilling. "I'm the true architect here." Meanwhile, Darkseid himself was preparing for the final stage of his plan. He had already begun to reshape the absolute universe into a dark, twisted version of what he desired. But he had one final goal: to bond with the Spectre, the embodiment of God's judgment, the last piece of the puzzle that would make him the ultimate force in the multiverse. With the Spectre's power in his grasp, Darkseid would be unstoppable. And nothing, no hero, no army, no universe, would stand in his way. As the Justice League Unlimited and Joker raced to find the Omega particle, their paths began to converge. They all knew that whoever controlled the Omega particle would control the fate of the absolute universe. But would the Justice League be able to outsmart Darkseid and Joker in time? Or would they fall victim to the absolute universe's twisted design? The clock was ticking. The universe itself was changing. And with it, everything they knew about hope, about heroes, about the multiverse, was being tested like never before. Superman and his team had one final chance to stop Darkseid. But as the forces of evil gathered, the odds grew ever steeper. Would they survive long enough to destroy the miracle machine and save the multiverse? Or would they be swallowed whole by the very universe they were fighting to protect? The Omega Gambit, the absolute universe, was more than just a twisted version of reality. It was a battlefield, a place where the laws of existence bent to the will of its dark creator, Darkseid. With every passing moment, the tension among the Justice League Unlimited grew. Their search for the Omega particle had taken them to the heart of the absolute universe. But they weren't the only ones hunting for it. Absolute Joker, once a mere chaotic force, had transformed into something far more dangerous, a cold, calculating entity who had learned the ultimate secret of this universe. With Darkseid on the cusp of achieving godhood by bonding with the Spectre, the stakes were higher than ever. The Omega particle, the source of Darkseid's power, was the key to everything. Whoever controlled it would shape the fate of the multiverse, and the Justice League knew they couldn't afford to let either Darkseid or Joker get their hands on it. Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, and the rest of the team moved through the bleak, war-torn landscapes of the absolute universe, where every shadow seemed to hold an enemy and every corner could bring a new danger. The reality around them was collapsing, bending, and shifting like a puzzle slowly coming undone. The world itself was as much an adversary as the villains they were fighting. "We need to find it, and we need to find it now," Batman said, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the barren horizon. "Darkseid is too close. If he bonds with the Spectre, we'll be facing an enemy unlike anything we've ever encountered." Superman's jaw tightened. He was used to being the symbol of hope, but in this universe, that hope was a dying ember. The absolute universe had erased everything they had fought for, everything they had built. This was no longer the world they knew. It was a place where hope had become a mere memory, and survival was all that mattered. But despite the odds, Superman refused to give in. If we're going to stop him, we need to move fast. The Omega particle is the key, and we won't have another chance. The Justice League had split into smaller teams, each one searching different areas of the absolute universe for any sign of the Omega particle. But as they pushed forward, something was off. The deeper they ventured into the universe, the more they began to feel its weight. It was as though the very air was oppressive, the fabric of reality itself shifting and warping around them. It wasn't just a matter of fighting against Darkseid or Joker. It was a battle against a universe that had been designed to resist them at every turn. Meanwhile, Absolute Joker was already steps ahead. He had become obsessed with the Omega particle, understanding its power and how it could reshape everything. But unlike Darkseid, Joker didn't seek to rule the universe. He sought to destroy it. He had discovered that the Omega particle could undo the very laws of existence, giving him the ability to reset everything. He didn't want to build. He wanted to burn it all to the ground and start anew, from the ashes. "They think they can stop me," Joker muttered to himself, his grin spreading across his face. "But they don't understand. This universe? It's mine now." He clutched the Omega particle in his hand, feeling its power surge through him. His mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. The Justice League would never know what hit them. As the League continued their search, Darkseid's influence grew stronger. With every step they took, the universe itself seemed to warp in response to his will. The land twisted and reshaped, and time itself seemed to bend as Darkseid prepared for his final ascension. The Spectre was already under his control, and with its power, he would become the ultimate being in the multiverse. But as the heroes neared their goal, they realized something terrible. Joker wasn't just a wild card in this equation. He was an equal threat to Darkseid. His knowledge of the Omega particle made him just as dangerous. And while Darkseid had a plan, Joker had chaos. The two were on a collision course, and the Justice League Unlimited was caught in the middle. "We're running out of time," Wonder Woman said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to stop them both before they can use the Omega particle." As they neared the source of the universe's distortion, a dark, swirling vortex, their worst fears were realized. Darkseid had arrived. His presence was undeniable, his power emanating from the very fabric of the universe. The Omega particle was in play, and the Spectre was with him. The final battle was about to begin. "We can't face him head-on," Batman said, his mind already racing through the possibilities. "We need to distract him. Give us a chance to grab the Omega particle before he can fully harness it." Superman nodded. "Booster Gold, you're up." Booster Gold stepped forward, his face a mixture of determination and fear. He was the wild card, the one who had always thought of himself as an underdog. But today, he was more than that. Today, he had a mission. "I'll get the Omega particle," Booster said, his voice steely with resolve. "You guys take care of Darkseid and Joker." The team nodded, understanding that this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight to keep the very fabric of reality from falling apart. As the final battle loomed, the Justice League Unlimited had no choice but to confront the chaos head-on. Darkseid and Joker were powerful beyond measure, and with the Omega particle in play, the universe itself was at stake. The heroes had to outwit, outfight, and outlast the forces of evil that were closing in on them. And the clock was ticking. Clash of fates. The universe trembled. The very air felt heavy with the weight of destiny as the Justice League Unlimited stood at the precipice of their final battle. On one side, Darkseid, the godlike conqueror of realities, stood tall, his power fueled by the Spectre and the Omega particle. On the other, Joker, twisted and driven by chaos, clutched the Omega particle in his hand, knowing that with it, he could unravel all of existence. And in the middle of it all stood the heroes, desperate to save the absolute universe from their clutches. "This ends now," Superman muttered, his voice low but unwavering. He couldn't let this universe fall under the control of either Darkseid or Joker. The Justice League had been fractured, but their resolve was stronger than ever. As the teams formed up, Booster Gold moved silently, his eyes locked on the Omega particle. It pulsed with an otherworldly glow, a beacon of unimaginable power. He knew what he had to do, but first he had to survive the fight ahead. The battle began with a shockwave of energy, the ground itself shaking as Darkseid unleashed his full power. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman charged forward, their united front pushing against the overwhelming force. Darkseid, with the Spectre's power, was an unstoppable force. His blows landed like meteors, each one shaking the fabric of reality itself. But even as the heroes engaged, Joker was not far behind. His laughter echoed across the battlefield, a twisted melody that rattled the heroes' nerves. His grin stretched wide as he watched them struggle. To him, this wasn't just a fight, it was a game. A game he intended to win. "You think you can stop me?" Joker cackled. "I'm the one with the real power now, and I'm going to burn it all down." With a flick of his wrist, the Omega particle pulsed brighter, sending out a shockwave of raw energy that tore through the ground. Booster Gold, who had been creeping closer, barely managed to avoid the blast, his heart racing. "Not yet, Joker," Booster muttered to himself, steeling his resolve. He had to wait for the perfect moment. But with Darkseid wreaking havoc and Joker growing more erratic, that moment was slipping away. Meanwhile, Batman was busy strategizing. He knew they couldn't defeat Darkseid through brute strength alone, not in this universe, where everything was designed to work against them. But there was one thing Darkseid didn't anticipate: the human mind. And no one knew how to outthink an opponent better than Batman. "We need to use his own arrogance against him," Batman said, gritting his teeth as he ducked a devastating blow from Darkseid. "He believes he's invincible, but that's his weakness." Wonder Woman nodded, her sword raised as she deflected another blow from Darkseid's destructive energy. "We need a plan. Fast." But Darkseid was already one step ahead. He had anticipated their every move, and with the Spectre at his command, he seemed unstoppable. His very presence warped the battlefield, as if reality itself bent to his will. "You cannot defeat me, heroes," Darkseid boomed, his voice resonating like thunder. "I am the beginning and the end of all things. With the Omega particle and the power of the Spectre, I will remake this universe in my image. You are nothing but insects to me." The ground shook as Superman and Wonder Woman attacked with everything they had. But even their combined strength was no match for Darkseid's overwhelming force. His hands swept through the air, and they were sent flying, crashing into the ruins of a nearby city. "We can't let him finish this," Superman said, struggling to rise. Batman was already on his feet, analyzing the situation. "Joker has the Omega particle. We need to separate him from it before it's too late, or Darkseid will have everything." And so, with no time to waste, the heroes formulated a new plan. Booster Gold was the key. He knew that he had to act quickly and decisively. The Omega particle could alter the course of the battle, but only if they could disrupt Joker's hold over it. The chaos intensified. Joker's laughter filled the air as he danced around the battlefield, his unpredictable attacks making it hard for the heroes to focus on anything but him. But even as he reveled in his newfound power, he wasn't prepared for Booster Gold's audacity. In a flash of movement, Booster Gold shot forward, dodging explosions and blasts, closing the distance between him and Joker. The villain turned, his eyes widening in surprise. "What are you?" Joker began, but it was too late. Booster Gold reached out and seized the Omega particle, his gauntlet absorbing the energy for a brief moment before the whole device flickered. The shock wave sent Joker flying, and the energy within the Omega particle destabilized. Booster Gold fought to control it, but the power surged through him, threatening to consume him. "It's now or never." Booster grunted, his body glowing with raw energy as he concentrated all his will on containing the power. Meanwhile, Darkseid, sensing his grip slipping, reached out to reclaim the Omega particle. But the universe was starting to fracture around him. The Spectre's power, once under his control, was starting to wane as the Omega particle destabilized. No, Darkseid roared, his fury rising to a new level as reality itself seemed to break down around him. And in that chaos, Booster Gold made his move. The final confrontation. The absolute universe had reached its breaking point. Reality was buckling under the weight of two forces, the twisted chaos of Joker and the godlike might of Darkseid. In the midst of it all, Booster Gold was holding the Omega particle, its immense power surging through him, threatening to overwhelm his body and mind. "I can't hold it much longer," Booster grunted, sweat pouring down his face as he struggled to control the energy coursing through him. His hands trembled, the Omega particle growing more unstable by the second. It was no longer just a source of immense power. It was a ticking time bomb, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of the absolute universe. But there was no time for hesitation. Darkseid, sensing his ultimate prize slipping from his grasp, roared in fury. His immense form surged forward, using the power of the Spectre to unleash a cataclysmic energy blast that shattered the earth beneath him. "You dare defy me?" Darkseid thundered, his eyes glowing with malice. He was close, too close. The Omega particle was his to command, and he would crush anyone in his way. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman fought valiantly to hold him off, but it was clear that without the Omega particle, they were hopelessly outmatched. Darkseid was invincible, a god whose power could reshape entire worlds. But there was one thing Darkseid underestimated: the heart of a hero. Even as his forces closed in, the Justice League Unlimited would not give up. Booster Gold, the unlikely hero, was their last hope. The battle raged on around them as Booster Gold, eyes flashing with determination, made the ultimate decision. With a final cry of effort, he released the Omega particle into the air. The blast that followed was blinding, tearing through the battlefield like a storm of pure energy. Everything went silent. For a split second, it felt like the universe itself had held its breath. Then, the world exploded into a riot of color. The Omega particle tore through the very core of the absolute universe, causing reality to warp and fold in on itself. Darkseid screamed as the energy overwhelmed him, the Spectre's power evaporating into nothingness. His connection to the universe began to unravel, his body breaking apart under the force of the Omega particle's true power. But just as the universe seemed ready to collapse entirely, something unexpected happened. The Omega particle, its energy now unleashed, seemed to stabilize, as if accepting the will of the universe. The chaos began to subside. Booster Gold, exhausted and barely conscious, collapsed to the ground. But the battle was over. Joker laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. He had played his hand, and it had failed. The universe wasn't his to burn. The Omega particle had chosen its course, and its path led to the restoration of the multiverse, not its destruction. "No, no, no," Joker screeched, his laughter turning to rage. But it was too late. The absolute universe had already started to revert, the fabric of reality mending itself under the influence of the Omega particle's power. The heroes had won. As Darkseid vanished into the folds of nothingness, his plan undone, Superman approached Booster Gold, his voice filled with gratitude and awe. "You did it. You saved us all." Booster Gold, bruised and battered, barely managed a weak grin. "Hey, just doing my part. Maybe I'm not just a sideshow, after all." The Justice League Unlimited gathered around him, their faces filled with relief. They had faced the impossible, and they had won. Darkseid's reign of terror was over. Joker's chaos had been stopped. The Omega particle, now inert, was no longer a threat. But even as they stood victorious, Superman couldn't shake the feeling that the absolute universe had left its mark on them. The multiverse had been changed, twisted in ways they might not fully understand yet. But for now, they had triumphed. And that was enough. "We've won, but we can never let our guard down," Batman said, his voice cold but resolute. There will always be another battle. With that, the heroes of the Justice League Unlimited looked toward the horizon. The absolute universe had been saved, but the multiverse was vast, and they knew their fight was far from over. But as long as they stood together, there was hope. And no matter how dark the universe might get, that hope would always burn brighter than the forces of evil. As the sun began to rise over a restored world, Superman smiled, knowing that even in the darkest of times, heroes would always rise to protect the light.